Hey guys! Tonight we're stepping straight into the smoke and salt air of a Norse village, where your life begins not in silk or safety, but in the cold bite of northern wind and the warmth of the forge. You're not some noble's daughter swaddled in linen. You're the second child of a freeman, born to the scent of pine pitch and cod oil, and you spend your earliest days crawling between goat hooves and firewood stacks. Your first teething toy is probably a carved wooden horse. Your second is a bone-handled knife you're definitely not supposed to touch. Your mother teaches you to spin flax and gutfish, sure, but your favorite sound is the clang of iron on iron, and your favorite person is that one-eyed blacksmith who tells you stories of the gods with sparks flying off his anvil. Every tale he tells ends in someone being gloriously killed, usually by a woman. Naturally, you eat it up. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments so I know where my Shieldmaidens are listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're not supposed to want the things you want. Girls in your village are praised for neat stitching and quiet footsteps. But you've got bruised knees, a chipped tooth, and a fierce gleam in your eye. By the time you're 6, you can already throw a hand axe farther than your older brother, though, to be fair. He's not exactly setting a high bar. When the local seeress visits, she touches your forehead and mutters about strange fates. You pretend not to hear, but you store her words away like you would a secret knife under your tunic. Mainstream history will tell you that girls in Viking society were kept close to the hearth, married off early, and rarely touched weapons. But the sagas? The sagas sing of women who pick up shields and ride into war, not just as a novelty, but as warriors in their own right. Historians still argue whether those stories are fact, legend, or some heady stew of both. But in your story, you don't ask for permission, you pick up the sword and learn how to use it. At night, you fall asleep to the sounds of your father sharpening his sea axe by the fire, the smell of smoke curling into your hair. Your dreams are full of Valkyries, their armor shining like ice, their wings stretching over a field of crows. Sometimes they're laughing, sometimes they're screaming. You grow into your teenage years with a restlessness coiled in your chest like a serpent. The village boys test their strength against you in playful brawls until you start winning too often. After that, they claim they don't want to hurt you. Right. Meanwhile, the other girls talk about marriage prospects and babies. You nod politely, but your fingers twitch for a sword hilt, not a cradle. Fringe tidbit incoming. Some modern archaeologists believe they've uncovered graves of Viking women buried with weapons, not jewelry or cooking tools. One in Birka, Sweden, even had a full warrior's kit, from axe to game pieces for planning battle strategy. But here's the kicker. For over a century, scholars just assumed that skeleton was male, until DNA testing said otherwise. Oops. Anyway, one spring, your village is visited by a merchant crew returning from the east. They bring silk, spices, and stories. You're supposed to be helping your mother haggle for salt, but you're too busy eavesdropping on a grey-bearded raider describing a city called Miklagard, the great city, they say, with walls too high for gods to climb and gold coins the size of flatbread. It lights something in your chest. You want to see it. You want to raid it. That night, you sneak to the fjord, where the longships rock gently in the moonlight. You run your hand over the carved prow of one and whisper, "Take me with you." And something, maybe the gods, maybe just the sea air, whispers back. By the time you're 15, you've carved your own round shield, painted with the curling serpent of your father's line. You've stolen practice time with the warriors, dodged chores to learn footwork, and made yourself such a nuisance that finally, someone gives you a real blade. It's not glamorous. It's heavy and dull and smells like old leather, but it's yours. And you don't just carry it, you become it. You rise earlier than the sun now, long before the cockerel dares to yawn. Your boots crunch over frost-laced moss, and your breath puffs out in little ghosts as you trek to the edge of the training field, though field is a generous word for this lumpy patch of rock and mud. You've convinced an aging housecarl named Sten to train you, or rather, he's given up trying to say no. He mutters that Odin must have cursed his knees and his patience, but he keeps showing up, doesn't he? You hold your sword wrong, your stance is too narrow, you swing like you're stirring soup, every single day. He tells you these things, and every single day, you get a little better. Blisters become calluses, bruises fade slower, but you stop wincing when you get hit. By midsummer, you can spar for an hour without tasting blood in your throat. Sten stops correcting your grip. He just nods once and grunts like a man quietly proud. When the boys join for group drills, they're hesitant at first. A girl? With a shield? What if she breaks a nail? You break Eric's nose instead accidentally, sort of, and the teasing stops like a cut rope. From then on, they stop seeing a girl and start seeing an opponent. The Shieldmaiden image you're chasing isn't just about muscle, though. You learn to read runes, memorize victory poems, and understand how to gauge wind by the way it moves a raven's feathers. Battle is more than blood, it's calculation, luck, and listening to signs most people miss. That's the part you love most, learning the rhythm of it all. Mainstream fact check: most Viking women weren't warriors. The bulk of their lives revolved around running households, managing land, and keeping extended families fed and clothed, which, to be fair, is its own kind of heroic. But the fact that some women could own property, request divorce, and even demand blood payments if wronged, shows that Viking society wasn't all meathead patriarchy. You earn your place with stubbornness, not spectacle. There's no grand ceremony, no feathered headdress, no slow-motion montage, just sweat, bruises, and the quiet thrill of knowing no one can laugh you out of the circle anymore. Somewhere in the middle of your training, you meet Ilsa. She's taller than you, darker, with a voice like storm clouds, and a grin like she knows things you don't. She throws her axe like she's hurling lightning. During one sparring match, she knocks you flat with a shield bash, then helps you up with a wink and says, "Your guard's as wide as a fjord." You swear at her. She laughs. It's the start of something. You train together, eat together, mock each other mercilessly, and sleep back to back in the training hall during stormy nights. You start copying her shield techniques. She borrows your footwork. Eventually, people stop referring to you as individuals. It's always Ylsa and her shadow, or the twins, or those two maniacs with the boar tattoos. Here's your fringe tidbit. Some Norse sagas mention oath sisters or foster sisters who swore eternal loyalty to each other. Were they blood-bound besties? Romantic partners? Proto-feminist war wives? Historians still argue whether the bonds between these women were symbolic, emotional, or something far more intimate than marriage ever allowed. One rainy day, Ilsa carves matching spirals into both your shields and says, "Now we're a unit. If I fall, you take my place." You nod. No ceremony, no drama, just a bond stronger than iron rivets. Word spreads of your training. Old men shake their heads. The village skald weaves a little song about the Thunder Maidens that makes you cringe every time someone sings it off-key. But deep down, you're proud, and just a little terrified, because you know this was never just about proving you can fight. You want to be there on the real field, with the wind howling, and the enemy charging and the gods watching. So you train harder, practice blindfolded, run drills until your legs wobble, test each other on shield formations in your sleep. You even start using real weapons in sparring, earning cuts that need stitching and proud little scars that itch in the cold. One day, Sten watches you and Ylsa take down 3 opponents in a row. He doesn't say anything for a long time. Then he nods once, deeply, and says, "You're ready." Ready for what exactly? You don't ask. You just grin. That night, around the longhouse fire, you hear the rumors. A raid is being planned. A coastal monastery to the west. Riches, glory, and enough salt to last a dozen winters. Your heart hammers like a smith's bellows. They won't take you. You're too young, too new, too much trouble. So of course, you and Ylsa sneak onto the longship anyway. But that part's for next time. You're crouched in the dark belly of the longship, wedged between barrels of dried fish and someone's suspiciously sweaty cloak. Ilsa's beside you, arms crossed, trying not to sneeze. You can barely see her in the gloom, but you can hear the water slap against the hull, steady as a heartbeat. Above, the crew hoists the sail. Voices call out in rhythm. The oars dip. The ship groans and you're moving. You are no longer a village girl. You are aboard a drakkar, and your world is now the sea. Salt air rushes in through a crack in the wood, and you taste your future on your tongue, metal, smoke, and storm. The longship glides like a knife over silk, skimming through morning mist, so thick it feels like you're sailing through the land of the dead. You think about turning back, for exactly 1 second, but then Ylsa nudges you and whispers, "Told you we'd see the world," and it's too late for regrets. Hours pass, then days. You take turns sneaking up for food and information. The crew is too focused on the raid to notice 2 stowaways. Either that, or they just don't care. One man even tosses you an apple without looking your way. On the 4th dawn, the coastline sharpens into view-jagged cliffs, a sheltered cove, and perched above it all, the prize, a Christian monastery, its walls pale in the sun like bleached bones. You've heard about these places. Peaceful, rich, soft, full of gold crosses, wine, and monks who've never held a sword. Mainstream history agrees. Monasteries were favourite targets during early Viking raids. Isolated, wealthy, and woefully unprepared. They were basically the medieval version of "please rob me" signs. Lindisfarne was famously attacked in 793, sending shockwaves across Christendom. You're heading for a smaller, lesser-known site, but the concept's the same. The raid begins just after sunrise. You and Ylsa break cover only after the first shouts ring out. Chaos erupts, smoke coils toward the sky. You grab a fallen axe, run up the shore, and barrel into your first real battle. It's not poetic. It's not glorious. It's mud and screaming and slipping on your own feet. You almost drop your weapon twice. Someone charges you. You panic and throw your shield up. It works. The impact shudders through your arm like a kicked drum. You duck, swing wildly, and manage to clip your attacker's leg. He goes down. You don't wait to see if he's alive. You find Ylsa beside you, blood on her cheek, grinning like a lunatic. "Wasn't this your idea?" she shouts. You shout something back, but neither of you can hear it over the ringing in your ears. Eventually, the resistance crumbles. The monks surrender a run. A few are taken for ransom. You're left standing, weapon shaking in your hand, trying to decide if your legs are still part of your body. That's when someone finally realizes you're not supposed to be here. The Jarl approaches, helm off, brow thunderous. He demands answers. Ylsa shrugs. You brace yourself for exile or worse. Then he surprises you. He looks at the 2 of you, then at the enemy, dead behind you, and mutters, "Could have used 2 more like you sooner," and walks off. You just earned your place, not with petitions or praise, but with blood and mud and not dying. That's the Viking way. Fringe tidbit time. Some reports, like those from Arab traveller Ibn Fadlan, describe Norse women participating in raids as warriors, traders, and negotiators. Others insist they stayed home. Historians still argue whether those accounts reflect a broader truth or rare exceptions written to shock foreign audiences. But either way, in this moment, you're not a novelty. You're just another warrior with dirt on her boots. Later, while the others loot wine and silver, you find something odd, a tiny carved figure tucked beneath a monk's pillow. It's not a cross, but a small horned man, probably Loki, you guess. A secret convert? A joke? Or a warning? You don't know. You tuck it into your belt. It feels right to take it with you. That night, the warriors light a bonfire and pass around cups that smell like rotten apples and bravery. You sip yours, cough, and pretend it doesn't taste like goat's feet. Someone slaps your back. Ylsa sings a song so off-key it makes 2 ravens fly away in protest. You stare into the flames and realize, this is it. You're in. No more sneaking. No more proving. You have blood on your blade, salt in your veins, smoke in your hair. You are a Shieldmaiden, and this is just the beginning. The sea carries you home like a cradle of foam and wind. The longship skimming westward beneath skies streaked with gold. The loot is piled beneath deck-silver chalices, bolts of silk, a few wary monks bound for ransom, and the crew is already bragging about whose swords struck deepest. You and Ylsa sit side by side near the prow, each with a fresh scar and a reputation that now has its own legs. You're welcomed back to the village like returning storm gods. The children gawk. The elders shake their heads. A few wives quietly pocket trinkets. You toss them coins. They'll likely melt down into brooches and bribes. Sten simply nods once, deeply, the same way he did after your first sparring match. High praise. The feast lasts 3 days. The air is thick with roasting meat and sweaty wool. and the mead flows faster than the stories. You find yourself repeating your role in the raid until it starts to sound like someone else's tale, until you're not sure whether you really sidestepped that spear or if it just missed. But you don't care, because tonight is about the oaths. In Viking culture, warriors don't just swear by the gods, they swear by steel, by fire, by earth. Tonight, you and Ylsa kneel before the hearth with hands clasped around the hilt of your blade, flame dancing on your cheeks. You speak the old words not from a scroll, but from memory, the way your grandmother taught you to recite spells against bad harvests. Your voices blend, low and even. We vow shield to shield. We vow blade to blade. Let no storm part us. Let no god break us. It's not a marriage, but it's something deeper, a sworn sisterhood, a promise forged hotter than love and colder than death. Mainstream fact. Viking culture respected oaths almost religiously. Breaking one could get you outlawed or worse declared nithing, a creature without honor or name. Oath-breaking was spiritual bankruptcy, and vengeance for it was not optional, it was expected. Someone hands you a braided arm ring. It's not gold, but iron plain and heavy. It marks you as a proven fighter, entitled to a warrior's share of the loot, and a voice at the next thing, the village assembly, not a party, though it sometimes turns into one. And here's your fringe tidbit. There's evidence that Viking feasts sometimes involved hallucinogenic mushrooms, used by berserkers to enter battle-frenzied states. You're pretty sure the stew tonight includes a few suspicious red-capped fungi, because halfway through the evening, you watch a man challenge a goat to a duel. The goat wins. Later, as the fire dies down, and the mead turns from sweet to sickly, a skald stands to recite your tallies. Already, you and Ylsa are now characters in a half-true poem that somehow includes a dragon, a waterfall, and a seven-headed monk. You exchange looks. She shrugs. Could have been 8 heads, she whispers. The next morning comes too early, all dry throat and regret. You help clean the longhouse, sharpen your blades, patch your boots. Life settles into a rhythm. Train, prepare, wait. A quiet kind of readiness. But not everything is celebration and saga. One night, a neighboring clan sends word. They want tribute. They claim the last raid cut into their territory. Your Jarl refuses. The village braces for retaliation. You spend the next weeks building defenses, reinforcing the palisade, digging wolf pits, fletching arrows, until your fingers feel like someone else's blank. Ylsa teaches the children how to throw stones at knee level because Vikings didn't waste effort aiming for heads when a broken leg ended a fight faster. There's tension in the air now, like the breath before a shout. Historians still argue whether Shieldmaidens actually served in defensive roles, or whether their mention in sagas was symbolic. But archaeological remains from places like Hedeby and Rebay suggest women weren't just watching from the sidelines. Buried weapons, charred longhouses, and the placement of bodies all hint that when the village was threatened, everyone picked up something sharp. You do drills at dawn. You prepare oils for fire arrows. You even learn to forge spare nails for the shipyard. The blacksmith is gruff, but he lets you work the bellows, and once or twice he even grins. The attack doesn't come. Not that week, not the next. Instead, an early frost sets in, and with it, the first howls of wolves near the hills. The village focuses inward. Food gets tighter, fires stay lit longer, and in the flickering darkness you realize something. Battle is only one kind of test. Endurance is another. But for now, you sleep with your blade beside your bed, and your shield against the wall, because the oaths you made by fire and steel, those never hibernate. Winter slinks into the village on silent paws, draping everything in white silence and ice-thick breath. The longships are hauled ashore, turned belly up like hibernating beasts. The fjord freezes at the edges. You no longer wake to sword drills and shouted insults. Now, you wake to the creak of roof beams under snow, and the strange hush of a world too cold to speak. But survival is its own battle. You learn quickly that warriors who swagger through summer can be humbled by a splinter in winter. You chop wood until your hands blister beneath your gloves. You haul water in buckets that freeze solid if you blink too slowly. The cold seeps into your bones, into your thoughts, and into the small spaces between people where tempers shorten and food portions shrink. Your mother says, now we see who the real warriors are. She's not wrong. Rationing begins. No more feasts. No more meat unless something stumbles into a snare. You and Yilsa take turns checking traps on the forest edge, wrapped in enough layers to double your size. The snow groans under your boots. Sometimes, it's just a rabbit. Other times, well, one morning, you find the tracks of a bear circling your snares. You don't speak of it, but you start carrying an extra knife. Here's your mainstream moment. Viking settlements didn't survive on raiding alone. Farming, fishing, and careful stockpiling were the backbone of Norse life. A bad winter could unravel even the wealthiest clan. And while Viking winters are romanticized now for cloaks, firelight, steamy mead was more often bone-deep hunger and back-breaking work. Cozy, yes, but only if you earned it. The longhouse becomes both shelter and prison. The hearth glows, yes, but so do tensions. Old arguments bubble up. People start muttering about curses, about angry gods. The seeress is called to cast runes. She squints into the flames, frowns and says, "Something's coming, something worse than wolves." Great. Meanwhile, you're busy mending weapons, repairing boots, and taking shifts on night watch. You and Yilsa pass the hours telling exaggerated stories. She invents a saga where you kill a frost giant with a spoon. You retaliate by claiming she once dated Thor but dumped him for being too dramatic. The laughter helps. So do the whispered confessions, like how you sometimes miss soft things apples, soap, beds that don't smell like smoke and goat. She nods and says, "I miss my dog." You didn't know she had one. You both go quiet for a while. Then, one night, the wolves actually come. You hear them first howls drifting through the fog like warnings sung by ghosts. Then the sheep start screaming. Then it's chaos. You run into the dark, shield slung, torch high, a flash of white teeth, a streak of fur. You and the others form a loose circle, shouting and throwing burning sticks. One wolf gets in too close. You stab. It yelps and bolts, blood steaming on the snow. When it's over, 4 sheep are gone. 1 goat's half eaten. You've got a gash down your leg and adrenaline buzzing like bees in your ears. In the aftermath, as the fire is stoked back to life, someone mutters that it wasn't wolves, that it was something else. You roll your eyes, but Ilsa stays quiet. You ask her what she thinks. She says, "Not everything that walks on 4 legs is an animal." Fringe tidbit time. In Norse folklore, winter was when trolls, draugr, undead, and huldufolk, the hidden people, were most active. Some believed the long nights were thin places, where otherworldly beings could slip through. Historians still argue whether such beliefs were genuinely widespread or mostly tail fodder for bored villagers. But when your torch flickers low and the wind wails through the trees just so, even you aren't so sure. The wolf patrols continue. You and Yilsa set traps not just for animals, but for the fear creeping in at the edges of everyone's mind. Then, on the coldest night of all, a woman from the next village stumbles into your hall. Her fingers are black with frostbite. Her eyes are wild. She says her home was taken by raiders, she claims, or spirits, depending on which part of her story you believe. The Jarl calls a meeting. Even the oldest warriors lean in, tense. Should you ride to help, or stay behind, guarding what little you have? You and Yilsa volunteer without hesitation. The Jarl scowls but nods. A party is formed, sleds readied, blades sharpened. Before dawn, you pull your cloak tight and look back at the longhouse. You wonder if you'll see it again, because this winter isn't just cold, it's testing you. Not with swords, not with fire, but with silence, scarcity, and the thin, sharp edge of fear. You ride out into the frost with breath like smoke and nerves like glass, your sled runners slicing tracks into snow so deep it swallows the past. Beside you, Ilsa hums under her breathone of those old half-tunes sung to scare off spirits or boredom, or both. The rest of the rescue party is a grim pack of warriors wrapped in fur and suspicion. No one talks much. Everyone keeps a hand close to their weapon. The path to the neighbouring village should have taken a day. It takes 2. The drifts are worse than expected, and the frozen river you plan to cross has cracked open like a wound. You detour through a pinewood so thick it muffles sound, and somewhere in that silence, your courage starts to itch. It's the kind of quiet that makes you wonder whether the world is holding its breath, or whether something's watching. When you arrive, you find no village. You find remains-charred beams, blackened snow. One hut collapsed inward like a gutted animal. No bodies, just ashes and torn footprints leading away toward the hills. One of the men says raiders did this. Another shakes his head. Raiders don't take everyone. You don't say it aloud, but you agree with the second. There's a wrongness here. A silence that's not empty, but listening. The group splits. You and Yilsa follow the tracks. Up through hills brittle with frost. Through brush so dense your cloaks snag and tear. Eventually, you come upon a cave mouth, wide and dark and steaming faintly in the cold. Someone mutters a prayer. You enter. Inside, the air is warm and naturally so. Your torch flickers, casting shadows that don't behave. At the back, you find them. Villagers, huddled and shivering but alive. One old man reaches out and croaks. We fled. We had to. Between gasps, they describe what happened. A figure came in the night. Not a raider, not a beast. A man in white, barefoot on the snow, face veiled, eyes like fire. He came to collect. People froze at his touch. Others followed him willingly. The ones who refused were never seen again. Mainstream historians chalk these kinds of tales up to starvation, trauma, and folklore stew. Norse legends are full of nightwalkers and revenants, figures who come in snowstorms and drag people away. Draugr, they're called. Undead warriors, often greedy chieftains, said to haunt the living. Historians still argue whether these tales served as morality plays or genuine belief systems passed down as cautionary truths. You don't know what to believe. But that night, as you set up camp in the hills, something watches your fire. You can feel it. Not a wolf, not a man, something older. Ilsa sees it too. We shouldn't stay long, she says. This place remembers things. The next day, you help lead the survivors back. It's slower, harder, but they follow you, clinging to warmth, to hope. You feel like a leader, for the first time, not just a fighter. One fringe tidbit. Some Viking graves were deliberately weighed down with stones, as if to stop the dead from rising. Others had weapons broken before burial, perhaps to disarm the spirit in the afterlife. The boundary between death and the living wasn't fixed in Norse thought. It was more like seasonal. When you return home, the village receives you like heroes. There's no feast supplies are too tight, but they light extra torches in the longhouse. People whisper about what you saw, about the man in white, the cave, the warmth in the dead of winter. Some believe you, others don't, but they all look at you a little differently. You've crossed into another realm not just physically, but in reputation. You've brought people back, faced things you can't explain. You're no longer the girl who broke Eric's nose and snuck onto a ship. You're a warrior of winter, a Shieldmaiden who returned from silence. At night, you sit by the hearth, blade across your knees, while Ilsa weaves another binding charm into her bootlaces. Neither of you speak of the thing in the cave, but it lingers. Not like fear exactly, more like an echo, a reminder that the world is larger than your sagas admit, that you've seen what waits in the cold, and it knows your name. The thaw creeps in slowly, like a cat testing ice. Icicles drip into muddy puddles. Snow gives way to slush. Boots feel heavier with every squelching step, but spirits begin to lift. The longhouse windows are opened a crack to let in the scent of not quite spring. And then, the summons comes. The king is calling for warriors. Not just any raid this time, but a campaign organized, ambitious, and far from home. Ships will sail south and east, past familiar fishing grounds, and into lands ruled by foreign tongues, foreign gods, and very real treasure. Frankish silver, Saxon brooches, maybe even a sword forged by the legendary Ulfbert, whose blades cut cleaner than stories do. The message arrives carved on a rune stick, its curves unmistakable. It bears the king's sealer, snarling wolf. The Jarl reads it aloud. Then he passes it silently around the room, like a cup of bitter mead. Everyone's eyes flick to you and Ilsa. The decision isn't hard. You pack your things the same night. You've barely oiled your sword before your mother hugs you, too tightly, and slips a dried mushroom charm into your pouch. It keeps away rot, she says, and men with poor hygiene. You laugh, but you keep it. The journey to the king's harbour takes 3 days on foot. 3 days of marshes, drizzle, and bogs that want to eat your boots. But when you arrive by Odin's beard, it's worth it. There are ships, dozens, great sea serpents carved into their prows, Sails dyed with bright stripes, ropes as thick as your arm, warriors from every corner of the realm. Some wear bright cloaks, others have tattoos like vines crawling up their necks. Everyone's armed to the teeth and already arguing about who gets to die first. The king himself is a tall, scar-wrapped man with eyes like worn steel. He surveys his gathering with the cold pride of a smith admiring a weapon he's just forged. You and Ylsa are the only Shieldmaidens present. You're used to the stares by now. Some are curious, some are amused, a few are openly scornful. One man calls you Jarl's pets under his breath. Ylsa replies by sticking a fish in his boot while he's asleep. You swear it blinks at you. Here's your mainstream fact. Most Viking armies were made up of freemen answering the call of their lord. While they did have professional fighters, called herdmen, many were farmers or craftsmen turned warriors for a season. Campaigns like this one weren't just about conquest. They were political chess moves, marriages of convenience, and sometimes glorified resource grabs. And they were dangerous. You don't just face enemy blades. You face storms, bad maps, treacherous allies, and long stretches without so much as a stale oatcake. But you've trained for this. The fleet departs on a windless morning. Sails slack, oars splashing rhythmically. The king's ship leads, its mast hung with black pennants. You ride 3 vessels behind, seated beside Ylsa, hands tight on your gear. For 2 days, it's calm. Birds follow your ship. A pod of whales surfaces, then disappears like a dream. You catch a fish by stabbing it straight out of the water, which earns you a new nickname, Codslayer. On the 3rd day, land appears. Not like home. This shore is flatter, greener, and lined with white stone houses. You're told this is Saxon land-rich farmland and soft kings. Easy pickings. That afternoon, the camp is built inland. Tents rise. Guards are posted. Fires lit. Then the diplomacy begins. Wait, diplomacy? Yep. Before the fighting starts, the king wants to talk. Apparently, the local lord might be willing to buy peace with coin and wine rather than steel. You roll your eyes. Ylsa mutters, "Where's the fun in that?" But this is war by grown-up rules. Every day without bloodshed means more supplies, more trade opportunities, more chances to build something lasting. Still, the mood sours. Warriors sharpen blades they're not allowed to use. Drunken arguments flare up. 2 men duel over a spilled stew pot. You and Ylsa spar daily just to stay sharp. You also teach a few children how to do cartwheels. Because why not? Fringe tidbit time. Not all Viking campaigns were raids. Many involved complex negotiations, tribute demands, or even mercenary work. The Varangian Guard in Byzantium was made up largely of Norsemen, some of whom had once raided the very cities they now swore to protect. Historians still argue whether these warriors were loyal soldiers or just very polite pirates. On the 6th day, talks break down. Apparently, someone insulted someone's goat, or wife, or both. The details are blurry. But suddenly, the king's order is clear. Ready arms. Prepare to march. You grip your shield, heart pounding, eyes fixed on the horizon. This is not your first battle, but it will be your biggest. And you can feel the gods leaning closer. Dawn finds you lacing your boots with trembling fingers. The air is damp, thick with the scent of earth and iron, and your breath curls before you like smoke from a slow-burning fire. Around you, warriors murmur last words to their gods, their ancestors, or no one at all. Someone sharpens a blade so slowly it's more prayer than preparation. Ylsa gives her axe one last kiss, not for luck, she says, but to remind it who it belongs to. The enemy waits upriver. A Frankish fort, they say, built on a natural rise, with palisade walls, watchtowers, and a river that loops behind it like a silver blade. It's not a castle yet, too early for that, but it's more than a simple village. The king's scouts say there's a garrison. Archers, traps, some hired swords, likely desperate types who eat boiled bark when coin runs out. It's a proper test. You march with the second wave, boots squelching in the wet grass. Birds scatter at the sound of drums. The lead force moves quickly, shields raised, hoping to reach the walls before the alarm can fully spread. Spoiler, it spreads anyway. A bell rings out harsh, metallic, panicked. And just like that, everything speeds up. The siege begins. You'd always imagined sieges were slow. Turns out, the start is anything but. Arrows streak through the sky. Ladders slam against the walls. Men shout in 3 languages. Mud sprays, blood follows, and you're suddenly shoulder to shoulder with Ilsa, driving forward like your whole body's become one large yes. You reach the wall. You climb. It's chaos. A bucket of pitch splashes to your left, catching someone's sleeve. Screams. You don't look. You duck under a spear thrust, hook your axe behind a plank, and pull. The defender topples with a yelp. You follow him down, landing in a heap that knocks the wind from your lungs. Mainstream history tells us that Viking siege warfare evolved over time, from hit-and-run coastal raids to full-scale inland campaigns with siege engines, rams, and even rudimentary sappers. This feels less like evolution and more like controlled madness. You find yourself in a courtyard choked with smoke. A man charges you. You sidestep, bash with your shield, and let Ilsa finish the job. Behind you, the king bellows something. You can't hear the words, only the tone. Command, fury, triumph, then an explosion of splinters. The gate bursts inward. They've breached the wall. You press forward, fighting not people now, but confusion. Friend or foe? You don't know. It's all helmets and limbs and panicked eyes. Someone pushes you. You push back with your shield and step into a side corridor just to breathe. And that's when you see her. A woman, Frankish, dressed like a noble, not a soldier. She's trying to haul a chest across the floor, likely filled with coins or jewels or family secrets. She sees you, gasps, and flinches like you've already swung your axe. But you don't. You stand there, breathing, thinking, because this is the part no saga ever lingers on. The moment after the rage, when you choose what kind of warrior you are. Ilsa appears beside you, looks at the woman, then at you. Your call, she says. You exhale slowly, take a step forward, and help the woman push the chest into a hidden alcove. You nod once, and she nods back. That's it. No thanks. No soft music. Just 2 people who could have been enemies, choosing not to be. Fringe tidbit. Some Norse raids ended in alliances, marriages, trade deals, even friendships. Viking culture didn't romanticize mercy, but it didn't always punish it either. Historians still argue whether acts of kindness in war were rare exceptions or simply under-recorded truths. By dusk, the fort is taken. The king declares victory. Fires are set for signal. Banners are raised. You sit beside a barrel, wiping blood off your boots, trying to feel something other than exhausted. Ilsa hands you water. You drink deeply, then ask, "Did we win?" She shrugs, still breathing. You sleep under the stars that night, sword in hand, wondering how many ghosts you've collected in your shadow. Because today, you climbed a wall, took a fort, and saw 1,000 shades of death. And none of it felt like glory. Just grit, heat, and the awful, aching knowledge that you're not done yet. The land you march through now is stranger with every mile. The trees grow differently taller, yes, but twisted, like they're reaching for something just out of reach. The birds sound like they're mocking you. Even the rain feels foreign, falling in soft sheets instead of the sideways slaps you're used to back home. You've left the Frankish fort behind, along with the men who died defending it. A few of the king's warriors stayed behind, garrisoning the place in case the locals try to retake it. But the real campaign moves forward, deeper south, toward places with warmer sun, darker bread, and gods with no sense of humor. You pass through villages where the people stare without speaking. Some offer bread and salted meat. Others offer locked doors and long silences. You can't blame them. Your arrival doesn't exactly scream hospitality. And then, one afternoon, you reach the market town. It's not under siege, not burning, just alive. Merchants cry out in languages you don't know. Children run barefoot between stalls. There's music flutes, maybe, and a woman selling eels from a barrel that smells like 7 kinds of regret. This isn't a raid. This is a stop. The king wants supplies, and some of the local lords are willing to trade. You and Yilsa walk through the market like you've stumbled into another life. You see fabrics dyed in colors your village doesn't even have names for. You try a fruit that tastes like sunshine and soap. You pet a dog with only 3 legs who immediately adopts you. Then you meet her. A woman selling painted wooden charms. Not Norse, not local something else. She speaks in a language you don't understand, but her smile is soft and her eyes are old. She presses a charm into your hand, unasked. It's shaped like a spiral, carved from bone, You try to return it, but she closes your fingers around it and says one word: remember. You don't know what she means. Mainstream fact. Vikings didn't just raid, they traded. Extensively. Arabic coins have been found in Swedish graves. Norse goods turned up as far as Baghdad and North Africa. They weren't just marauders, they were merchants, explorers, diplomats, sometimes all in the same afternoon. That night, a feast is held between your warband and some local allies. It's awkward at first, too many languages, too much suspicion, but eventually, someone passes wine. A Frankish warrior challenges a Norseman to an arm wrestle. Ilse bets half your loot on the Norseman, loses, and spends the rest of the night sulking into her cup. You end up talking with a Moorish merchant who's travelled farther than anyone you've ever met. He tells you about a city of marble, where libraries rise taller than halls and water flows through every street. He calls it Kurtuba. You try to say it. Fail. Try again. He laughs and says, close enough. You ask him if he's ever seen women fight. He lifts an eyebrow. Only the smart ones. Ollers. Here's your fringe tidbit. A few accounts mention Norse women travelling as part of raiding or trading parties, not just as wives or servants, but as negotiators, interpreters, or even combatants. One grave in Russia, dated to the Viking Age, held a woman buried with both weapons and scales for weighing silver. A warrior and a trader? Possibly. Historians still argue whether she was an exception or part of a forgotten norm. In the morning, your warband moves on. You look back at the town. You think about that charm in your pouch, about the spiral, about what it means to remember in a life like this. You start to feel something strange. A crack, not in your armor, in your story. You've always believed in the gods, the sagas, the glory of the shield wall. But now, you're not so sure. These people worship saints, not Odin. They bury their dead differently. Speak kindly to dogs. Wear shoes without fur. And they seem somehow fine. You talk with Ilse about it. She shrugs. Different paths, she says. Same end. You nod. But the question nags you. What if your sagas don't have all the answers? What if the world is bigger than the stories you've been told? That night, you dream of Homenot, the longhouse, or the training field. But the cold sea, your village barely a smudge on the horizon, and the sound of gulls calling something you almost understand. When you wake, the charm is warm in your hand, and the road stretches on. The sun's high and cruel when the betrayal comes. It starts like any other day marching, sweating, ignoring the ache in your back. The king leads from the front, flanked by his closest warriors, barking orders with that clipped tone that sounds like he's swallowing metal. You and Yilsa trail behind, joking about someone's ridiculous helmet plume when the rider arrives. Fast, alone, dust curling behind him like smoke. He speaks to the king, then hands over a scrap of cloth. Not a letter, a sigil. Your Jarl's crest split in half, and blood-streaked. The king's jaw tightens. He says nothing, just nods, and suddenly everything accelerates. New orders shouted, scouts sent, armor checked, weapons drawn. The friendly tone of the march twists into something sour. You and Yilsa catch a snippet of conversation from a nearby warrior. It was an ambush. Someone gave them our route, our camp, our names. Your name. Your Jarl's dead. Or close enough. Half the warband sent to guard the rear convoy was wiped out. Supplies gone. And word has it, the attackers were led by someone who knew your side's tactics, your rituals. That's when you hear the name. Thora, your old training partner, oath sister. Left the village seasons ago, said she was going to join a merchant ship. You'd thought it was cowardice. Maybe it was strategy. She's leading a band of mercenaries now, killing people you fought beside. Maybe for silver, maybe for revenge. Ilse says nothing. She just starts sharpening her axe, slower than usual, focused. The betrayal hits harder than steel, because Thora wasn't just a friend. She was one of you. One of the few who understood what it meant to train in secret, to bleed in shadow, to earn your place without ever being invited. She laughed like you did, spoke in the same half-sarcastic tone. She called herself your mirror once, and now she's your enemy. Mainstream note. Internal betrayal wasn't rare among Norse warbands. Loyalties shifted fast. Honor mattered, but so did silver. A shield. Sister today could be tomorrow's foe. The sagas are full of oaths made and broken. especially among those with blood feuds or rival ambitions. Historians still argue whether these betrayals were outliers or inevitable in a society built on personal reputation and revenge. The king holds a war council. His advisors bicker. Some want to turn back, consolidate. Others demand immediate retribution. You and Ilse volunteer without being asked. The king raises an eyebrow. 2 women against Thora's whole band. You say, 2 women who trained beside her, who know how she thinks. Ilse adds, and who owe her a blade's answer. He considers this, then nods once. So you ride. Light, quiet, dangerous. It's just the 2 of you, like old times, only now the stakes are sharpened. You find Thora's camp on the 3rd night. It's tucked into a forest glade, lit by a small fire, a handful of guards competent but relaxed. No one expects trouble. Not here, not now. You watch for hours, until finally you see her. Thora. She's changed. Older, leaner, but the same hard eyes, same scar above her brow, same confident swagger you used to admire. She's talking with another mercenary, laughing, and for a heartbeat, you almost forget why you're here. Almost. Fringe tidbit. Norse legal culture often allowed blood feuds and revenge killings to be resolved through something called wergilde man, price paid to the victim's family. But not everyone accepted money for blood. Some wounds had to be answered the old way, steel for steel. You wait until dawn. Then you walk into the camp. No sneaking, no ambush. Just you and Ilse, shields on your backs, swords sheathed, hands raised. Chows erupts, swords drawn, voices rise. Thora steps forward, her face unreadable. You came. You say, we want to talk. She scoffs. Now you care about talking? Ilse says, you owe us truth. The circle forms around you mercenaries watching, tense. Thora explains her side. She left because she was done waiting, done begging for scraps of respect. She saw a better deal. Took it. You say, you took lives. She says, so do you. Silence. Then she says, you want a duel? You nod. Just you and her. No interference. No saga will sing of it. But the fight is brutal. Fast. Close. The kind where emotion leaks into every swing. You've never fought harder. And in the end, Thora lies bleeding. Not dead, but defeated. You leave her alive, because some betrayals deserve to linger. That night, by the fire, Ilse turns to you and says, still think we're the heroes? You stare into the flames. I think we're surviving. Ah! The path back to the war camp is eerily quiet, like the forest itself is holding its breath after what you left behind. Thora is alive, barely. Her warband is scattered. You don't feel victorious. You feel hollow, like the weight of that duel sits not on your shoulders but deep inside your ribs, shifting with every breath. Ilse limps beside you, nothing serious, just a pulled muscle and pride. She hasn't said much since the fight. Not because she's angry, just thoughtful. Like something about seeing Thora again cracked open a box she'd sealed a long time ago. You feel it too. When you return, the camp has changed. Word of Thora's defeat reached them before you did. The king greets you personally, something he's never done. He doesn't offer thanks, just a nod. The kind of nod men give when they acknowledge another wolf in the pack. You've moved up in the ranks now. You're given command of a small Unit 12 warriors, most of them younger, wide-eyed. They look at you the way you once looked at Sten. You try to speak with the same calm he had, but your voice still trembles sometimes. You're learning that leadership doesn't mean knowing everything. It means pretending you do long enough to get through the next firestorm. Mainstream reality check. Women didn't often command Norse warbands, at least not according to the standard sagas. But that doesn't mean it didn't happen. A few poetic sources mention women leading expeditions or holding territory. Scholars still debate whether these are metaphorical exaggerations or reflections of actual historical outliers. Either way, in your case, no one's challenging your authority, not after what you've done. Preparations begin for what the king calls the final strike. The Saxon allies have backed out. The enemy has consolidated. The campaign, once sprawling and ambitious, now feels like a closing fist. You'll be leading the central flank in what could be the largest engagement yet upon field. Full force, no quarter. You check your gear obsessively, restring your bow, sharpen your blades, repaint your shield. this time with the spiral charm from the market town etched into the center, not for protection, for memory. The night before battle, Ilse finds you sitting by the river. She says nothing for a long time, just sits, watching the current slide past like time itself. Then she says, "If we don't make it back." You stop her. "Don't. I'm just saying, if we don't, we will." She nods. "Once. Then I want you to know, that night with the wolves, I wasn't scared because of the animals. I was scared because I finally had something to lose." You don't answer. You just reach over, take her hand, and hold it. Fringe tidbit. In some Viking funeral rites, it was common for close companions to be buried together. Romantic, platonic, sworn sibling labels didn't matter as much as the bond itself. Loyalty was sacred, so was memory. The worst fate wasn't death, it was being forgotten. At dawn, the horns sound. You line up with your warriors, breath steaming, armor creaking, hearts pounding like war drums. Across the field, the enemy assemblessa, mixed army of Saxon infantry, desperate mercenaries, and some cavalry borrowed from a neighboring kingdom. It's like staring at every version of death all at once. The king rides down the line, shouting encouragement, promising riches, promising fame, promising that those who fall will dine in Valhalla. You just tell your unit to keep their shields tight, watch each other's flanks, and stay close to you. The charge begins, not with a trumpet but a scream. It's fast, it's blinding, it's everything you've trained for, and nothing you expected. Arrows rain, shields crack, men fall. You swing, block, kick, scream. You lose count of how many you fight, how many fall, how many you have to step over. You see Ylsa once in the chaos blood on her brow, axe swinging like it's alive. She grins when she sees you. That grin keeps you going. Hours pass, or minutes. Time collapses into instinct and motion. Eventually, the tide turns. The enemy breaks. Some flee, others surrender. A few fight to the end. You're still standing. Barely. The field is quiet again. Too quiet. You fall to your knees beside a tree. Shield cracked. Fingers trembling. You look around for Ilsa. You find her. She's alive. Cut up. Limping. But alive. You laugh. She laughs. Then you both stop. Because laughter feels dangerous now, like it might break something inside you. The king declares the campaign over. You've won. But what does that mean? You'll sail back soon. To a home that might not feel like home anymore. To a village that's heard your name in fireside stories, not in your own voice. To people who might not recognize what you've become. Because this final battle didn't just take lives. It took pieces. And some of them, you don't think you'll get back. You return not with a roar, but with silence. The longships glide into the fjord like ghosts, keels splitting the sea with barely a ripple. Your village emerges from the morning mist, just as you left it, though somehow smaller, less wild. The same crooked fence, the same smoke rising from hearth fires. But you are not the same. You step onto the dock, and someone calls your name, a child, maybe, or a neighbor who used to mock your training. Now they stare like you're a story walking in boots. Ilsa disembarks beside you, her hand brushing yours in that absent, anchoring way she's picked up since the final battle. Neither of you speaks. You don't need to. You've shared silence sharper than war. The Jarl's hall greets you with the low thunder of surprise. Some thought you'd died. Others thought you'd never return. The truth, like most things, lives somewhere between. You hand over your arm ring, not in surrender, but in completion. The campaign is done, your blood oath fulfilled. Now comes the hard part. Figuring out who you are without a war to define you. That night, a feast is held in your honor less raucous than the first, more respectful. Stories are told, some true, most not. In one version, you killed 10 men with a broken arrow. In another, you and Ylsa rode a dragon into battle. You don't bother correcting them. What matters is what's left behind. Mainstream reality. Norse society revered warriors, but the return home was often fraught. Survivors had to reintegrate into lives that no longer fit. Trauma wasn't a word then, but the effects were real, just hidden in drinking, silence, or restlessness. Historians still argue whether the sagas left out the quiet cost of war, whether they simply didn't know how to name it. In the weeks that follow, you try to adjust. You fish, help your mother with the goats, fix a leaking roof, All things you could have done blindfolded before, but now they feel unfamiliar, like you're moving inside someone else's life. Children follow you, whispering. One asks if you really saw ghosts. You say yes. Another asks if you missed the fighting. You pose. No, you say. Then softer. But I miss the clarity. Because the battlefield, for all its terror, gave you purpose, direction. Now in this quiet, you find your thoughts looping like a song with no chorus. You dream of Facessum you knew, others you never did. You hear bells, clash of blades, and that last scream before the final charge. Sometimes, you wake up gripping your axe, but slowly like ice melting into streams, you begin to rebuild. You teach, not officially, but informally. Younger girls approach you with makeshift wooden swords, and that same stubborn gleam you once wore. You train them, show them how to fall, how to rise, how to stand without flinching. You give them back what was never given to you. Ilsa builds a forge. She says it's to make tools, but you see the way she stares into the fire, like it holds all her unanswered questions. You help her anyway. 2 women hammering steel while the village watches from a safe distance. One evening she holds out a blade she's finished simple, sharp, balanced. She offers it to you. For next time, she says. You take it, even though you hope there's no next time. Fringe tidbit. In Icelandic sagas, retired warriors often became craftsmen, farmers, or even poets. One famous skald, Egil Skallagrimsson, was both a blood-soaked fighter and a composer of heart-wrenching verses. The sword and the song lived side by side. So what are you now? You're not just a Shieldmaiden anymore. You're a survivor, a teacher, a whisper of legend in a place where most legends fade before they ever breathe. One day, the seeress visits again. She sits across from you, peers into your face, and smiles. Still running toward the fire? She asks. You shrug. Someone has to. She nods. Then, after a pause, adds, You've done enough. You don't believe her, but it's nice to hear. Later, you and Ylsa walk the cliff path above the sea. The wind is brisk. Your cloak flaps like a banner behind you. Below, waves crash, gulls cry. Beside you, she says, Do you think the gods watched us? You look at her, then at the sky. I think they remember us, and that for now is enough. And now, you rest. The sea is calm again. The wind a whisper, not a howl. Your sword lies quiet beside your bed, its edge dulled not from disuse, but peace. You lie in your longhouse, the rafters above darkened by years of smoke and time. Outside, the hearth burns low, casting flickering shadows against the walls like sagas too soft to speak. The cold doesn't bite the same anymore. The hunger that once gnawed at your belly during endless winters now feels distant, almost unreal. You've walked through fire and frost, through betrayal, battle, and the kind of silence only ghosts truly understand. And still you're here. You hear children laugh in the distance, feet patter across packed earth, the sound of life, of rhythm, of tomorrow. You've taught them to be strong, yes, but also to be gentle, that their worth isn't carved into their shields, but into the way they treat those beside them, even the ones who never carried blades. Somewhere out on the horizon, beyond the mist and memory, the gods are still arguing about fate, about glory, about whether you were meant to survive all this. But you did, and that, maybe, is the most heroic thing of all. So now, let your body soften into the furs, let the noise fade, let the last embers burn low. You are home, you are safe, and your story will outlive even the stars. Good night.